Hello and welcome to the Gold Goats and Guns podcast for today, Thursday, December 3rd. I'm a little late, 2020. My name is Tom Luongo, and we have a lot to talk about. Today I have with me James Howard Kunstler, and a great analyst of things political and certainly in the domestic front. I've been reading James's work for years. I think we're mutually fans of each other's work, which would be great. We were put together for this conversation hastily, actually, by a mutual reader who said, y'all need to get together and talk. And you better make that happen now. I'm like, okay, I didn't have an idea for a podcast this week. So, yeah, let's do that. So we're a couple days late, but it's great to have James here. And we've been chatting amiably to get started here. So, James, welcome to the show. And let's get this party started. How are you?
A pleasure to be here with you, Tom, and I'm fine and dandy here in upstate New York, in the chill pre-Adirondack, pre-Green Mountain lowlands between Vermont and upstate New York.
Right. We're actually having 3 days worth of sub-freezing temperatures here in Florida. I'm actually having to run my wood-burning stove for the first time this year. This is actually the latest that I've actually had to deal with that. So obviously,
don't hurt yourself, son.
Yeah, I go through maybe 3/4 of a cord of wood a year. Like, it's not much. I don't even. I have 13 acres of hardwoods down here, James, and I don't cut it myself. I have a guy up the road who I get half a cord of wood for $80, and I just pay Curtis, because Curtis is a great guy.
That's the way to roll.
All right, so we talked briefly before we started recording this morning, and an email to try and center this talk. And I know that your primary focus, I think, like everybody's, is that we're dealing with a fraudulent election of some form or another. And I know you want to talk about the election today. I do as well. So let's start there. I've got some issues with the way the Trump legal team is handling this, and I have my opinions about what I think is happening, but I want to get your perspective on it first, and then we'll see where we go from there. So what do you think is actually happening? Do you think Trump has any chance of overturning the color revolution that is obviously in process here against his having a second term? I'll start it there and make it as broad.
Well, I think that what we're seeing is, sort of the final act in what's been a 4-year attempted coup d'etat.
Mm-hmm.
An eerie stillness has descended over the scene the last 10 days or so. And I think an awful lot is going on backstage that we don't know about. And I do hear from people who are retired military and retired intelligence, and I do get some information, although I can't vouch for its quality. And I think that what might be going on is this. I think in the background that there's a big battle going on between the Central Intelligence Agency, the Department of Defense, and the executive, with the latter two being on one side. So it's basically the DOD and the executive against the CIA. I think I think Mr. Trump is trying to dismantle the CIA's special ops program capacity and many of its accessories, like its own Air Force and its ability to carry out basically military operations overseas. And I think that there's been tremendous organized resistance against this that does not express itself in any of the sort of common parlance of the news.
Right.
I wonder how much John Brennan is behind a lot of this and has continued to be behind it for the last 4 years. Partly what signals that to me is his insouciant demeanor in his television appearances, as though he appears to know that he's got something going on that, is going to take care of his side of the equation.
Yep.
And I'm just saying, I like to say that I'm allergic to conspiracy theories, but nevertheless, I think that there's been a great deal of that. Gina Haspel's not on the scene anymore for the moment. She's sort of gone to ground. And I wonder how much Mr. Brennan was involved in the CIA operation out of Frankfurt, Germany, where supposedly Dominion servers were lodged and where supposedly a DOD special team went and seized them about 2 weeks ago or so.
Right.
I don't know whether that story is true. There are additional elements of the story that are a little janky, like there was a firefight between DOD forces and CIA personnel, and people got hurt. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but it's out there.
Yep.
And we don't know whether or what kind of IT forensics have been run on those machines. I suspect that there's a possibility that there may be a great deal of information about how this operation went down, the election operation, and that they know what happened and that they got these guys. And it's really now a question of how you move against them when just about every institution in the government and the people who run it are against you. So it's a very dicey situation. And I think that, Mr. Trump has a couple of choices. One is to attempt to let this play out legally and go to the Supreme Court and have it adjudicated. And I must say, I think that Mr. Trump has gone along with just about every legal avenue that he's been forced down for the last 4 years. He hasn't obstructed anything. He hasn't, he hasn't had a single conversation with John Durham. So he seems to be inclined by his past behavior to go down the legal route. But on the other hand, we're facing a kind of epical situation in the United States where, the Republic really may be at stake.
I agree.
And, the Republic may be taken over by a sinister cabal of, seditionists. And it's a horrible thing to say and express, but it may be a fact. And these things happen in history. And that's all. I'll just stop there for now. It's
sure. No,
what do you think?
I think you're soft pedaling. I think it's already been there for years. But I agree with so much of what you just said in that respect. And then going into the story about the servers over in Germany, just to make sure that everybody understands, I don't think either you or I believe the idea that U.S. armed forces went into a German company's like Cytel's offices to steal their servers.
Well, Tom, let me interrupt. I don't think it was a German company. I think that it was the CIA's chief overseas station for cyber warfare.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what I was saying. Is that I think that's it. There was the report from Sic Temper Tyrannis going over the reasons why that had to be right after the story broke, the story idea. So I think part of what's happening here, and this is where I'm going to get into kind of the political tactics. I think Sidney Powell bringing this up this way, I think she's doing it on purpose. I'll be honest with you, because to me it looks like, and I've listened to legal experts on this, like I think she's running a purposefully libelous public campaign against Dominion in order to try and invite them to sue her for libel. In that way, then she can go as the defendant, and then she can go to discovery. Right. And that's the only way she's ever going to get the discovery, because Dominion, if she sues Dominion, then Dominion will never allow for discovery. They'll
but it looks kind of to me like Dominion has opted out of that and did so about a week or 10 days ago. And they've gone to ground too. They're hiding.
Absolutely.
They don't want to say anything.
Oh, I know. But that also then silence then becomes mission to kill, in effect, in the court of public opinion. Because the way I look at this, and I've been saying this since May, since like 3 days after the George Floyd riots broke out, and it was quickly morphed into something far bigger than people being upset about George Floyd, which is that this is the color revolution for the United States. This is the black revolution. Let's not kid ourselves. That's the color, right? We have to pick a color. It's orange in Ukraine. It's brown here. It's purple there. Whatever. It's the black revolution here in the United States, and they've been running that script all summer long, getting to the point where they can get to this moment in time. Now, when you beat the color revolution after the election by turning public opinion against the coup plotters, right? How did Lukashenko in Belarus turn the tide there? Because they ran a color revolution op, started by Pompeo, ran a color revolution op the summer against not Poroshenko, but we did one against Poroshenko as well, but not Poroshenko, Yanukovych, Lukashenko in Belarus, and he did it by allowing the coup to use up all of its energy in the initial rush, weather the storm, publicly get the military on his side, and then unleash popular support in the opposite direction. And once you saw pro-Lukashenko marches in Minsk that were of the same size as the anti-Lukashenko protests that happened the day after the election, you knew that it was over and done with. You knew that that's all that was done. And that's what Linwood and Powell, and that's what Trump's speech last night from the White House was all about. It was about now setting the public opinion counter narrative right now at this moment in time, right before we go to certify electors, the state legislatures go to certify electors in order to try and turn public opinion. Because this is not going to be won in the court of law. The courts have already proven, as far as I'm concerned, that they're completely corrupt. That that Robert Barnes is correct, and that the Federalist Society guys are all in on the grift. So, and that you do the legal stuff in order to push the court of public opinion in the right direction, so that the day comes when 75 million Trump voters say, no, you cannot in good conscience certify Pennsylvania's results, Georgia's results, Nevada's results. And that's all they got to do is deny those three states, and Biden can't get 270 electoral votes.
Yeah, well, but getting back to the
Sure.
court of public opinion,
sure,
the engines of public opinion are hostages to the coup.
I agree.
And it's almost impossible for the so-called quote news to get out to the public arena anymore. Although, we must say that there's this gigantic internet alternative universe of news. The trouble is it's so disaggregated that it doesn't have any giant looming authorities like the New York Times and the cable TV network. So that's very problematical. But I do think that there's a large number of people out there in the country who are hip to all this, and I think they're getting more and more pissed off.
Oh yeah, no, I agree, completely agree. And I think that I don't know that the timeline favors Trump and Powell and Linwood. I'm not saying, when I laid all that out, I wasn't telling you, this is the way it's going to work out, it's all going to be great. No, I'm like, this is what's happening. Now ask me what my probabilities are as to whether I think this is going to work or not.
Yeah.
Well, that's a different story. At best, it's a coin flip, and at worst, it's probably closer to 25 or 30%. I think that color revolutions are only capable of being successful when you have two things: one, corporate or oligarchic sponsorship, which this one definitely has, and a clear demographic divide.
Yeah, but then it raises the question. I mean, a lot of people are kind of assuming that there's a kind of an end zone to this, which is January 20th, and once you get Joe Biden installed, it's a done deal. Right. I don't think so at all. I think that in the event that he did get installed, and I'm not sure that he will at all, and I do think that the idea that he represents a serious security risk is something that we're really going to have to. That's going to come into play.
I agree.
But it's not going to stop after January 20th. Moreover, what that whole coup regime faces after this is settled one way or another, if they got into power, is that we're deep into the thing that I call the long emergency, which is kind of a permanent contraction of the economy with a lot of rippling side effects and cascading difficulties and vicissitudes that are going to really increase the distress that people feel in this country. So this is not over for them by a long shot, nor for the people of the USA by a long shot. We're facing what is going to be a significant downdraft in the national standard of living, and a whole lot of social friction and conflict boiling off of that. And a Biden administration would be buried in all that. And the idea that they'd be able to pull off some kind of woke social revolution is preposterous under those
It is.
circumstances.
It's absolutely. No, I agree with that. But before we get too far afield, that's a great point, and I really appreciate it because it's where I want to go. But I also want to go back to the point we made earlier about where the DoD fits in all this, because I don't think we got that completely fleshed out. Because
I just want to say that I think that what Mr. Trump has done is that he's taken command of the DoD over the last 2 months.
I agree.
And there's quite a revolution going on there too that we don't hear anything about.
No, of course not. And which brings me back to a point that I like to make a lot, which is that spooks start civil wars, but militaries end them. And this is the way that when you really break this down, that's what we have to. If there's a chance that this is going to go, quote unquote, the good guys' way. Mm-hmm. For very small values of good guys, even when you're talking about somebody like Donald Trump.
And can I make something clear?
Sure.
Sure. I have basically staked a position in support of President Trump in the last year,
right?
Because of what I've observed in the campaign against him.
Agreed.
And the bad faith and dishonesty associated with it. I've never been a fan of Donald Trump. I think that he's an awkward and in many ways childish character.
I agree.
But, history is a prankster, and history chooses its important figures in strange ways. And sometimes they come in strange packages.
I agree.
And for all of the the vulgarity and childishness of Mr. Trump, I must say his resilience and his courage is pretty remarkable.
I absolutely. Now, moreover, and most of my problems with Trump have to do with his lack of organizational prowess, to be honest with you.
Yeah, sure.
And that shows up in this cabinet picks and all the stuff that he never took control of his own organization, of his own administration. And I think a second term Trump is a much different character because he now has the experience to understand just how bad the situation is. Mm-hmm. And that being said, again, Trump to me is a perfectly realistic figure. He has his strengths, he has his weaknesses, and I love his strengths, that resilience, that unwavering disagreeableness to say, no, I'm not going anywhere. No, you're not going to get rid of me that easily. If you want to get rid of me, you're going to have to get rid of me. And in the process of getting rid of me, you're going to out yourselves as traitors to the country. And that's what he did. And for that, I have eternal thanks. Would I have liked him to handle foreign relations better? Absolutely. Do I like his policy towards Iran and all? No, I don't. But none of that matters right now and I did the same thing about a year ago. I finally said, no, Trump is the only option we have because everybody hates him. And a man and his positions by who his enemies are in politics. When everybody hates that guy, that's the guy you want to be on the side of because because the people who are in charge are terrible.
Perhaps like you, I've been battling most of my friends and acquaintances about this. And, whenever they twang on me about supporting Trump for the same reasons that you do,
right?
I have to ask them, are you in favor of the suppression of free speech? Are you in favor of suppressing the news? Are you in favor of cancel culture? Are you in favor of all of this fucking nonsense, ideological woke gender and race nonsense and the eternal race hustle that's being imposed on the USA? Because I'm not in favor of any of those things. Right. And I'm the enemy of the people who are in favor of that. And that happens to be right now the Democratic left or progressive left in America. Exactly. I'm their enemy. And I feel, explicitly that's the situation.
Right. And sometimes you have to hold your nose. And I mean, look, dude, I'm a hardcore anarcho-libertarian. Voting for somebody is anathema to my personal ethos. And guess what? I voted for Trump twice. Because at some point you gotta look at yourself and go, okay, voting is not, on a principle basis, I can make the argument all day long and very convincingly that voting is immoral. It doesn't matter. Every once in a while, you look at the situation and you go, yeah, that may be immoral, but I'm doing it anyway because it's the right thing to do. Because
I voted for Trump once.
What's that?
I voted for Trump once.
Yeah.
I voted
for him in 2016, and that was the first time I voted in an election since I wrote Ron Paul's name in 2008. Like, it's the only other, I mean, I haven't,
I
that was
wrote in
it.
David Stockman in 16.
And there you go. I've interviewed David. He's a great guy.
Yeah,
He's
I
also
know
one of
him.
he's also one of my patrons. He's a wonderful man.
Yeah.
Um, so and his criticisms of Trump are absolutely, and they're long, and they're voluminous, and they're accurate. But I think it misses the bigger picture, which is that this is a civilizational event. This is a civilizational conflict and a cultural conflict, and it's not a necessarily a political one that's based on any particular image or any particular issue. And you're not marrying the guy when you vote for him. You know,
Yeah.
you're looking at you're balancing everything and going, that's the guy that's going to give me most of what I want. I can do that. Even the great Murray Rothbard, voted in every election, and he couldn't be any more anarchist than Mr. Anarcho-capitalist himself, and he still
Hey,
voted in every election, right?
listen,
So
before this gets away from us, I'm
sure.
interested to hear what you think of the DOD situation, that we left behind about.
Right, right. Let us get back to that. I really want to believe all of it. Like I believe it. It's like this. When I put my rose-colored glasses on and I go in my freedom fighter, proto Tom Paine tri-cornered hat. I'm like, yeah, I don't know that I can though, right? But all of but there's this timeline of events since the election, firing Mark Esper, raising Miller up from CISA to the DOD, wiping out the top level of the freaking Pentagon, pardoning Michael Flynn to unleash Sidney Powell so that she's unleashed from her conflict of interest of suing the government and representing the people. All this stuff, and then the story about the servers in Germany. To me, that has a ring of truth to it. But again, we live in such a low information quality age, right? Or the
Hmm.
quality of information is really low, and and it extends into every corner of our life at the point.
Well, I'm
It is
wondering.
hard to do anything. And then just assign probabilities and go, if that's 70% correct, then this is what's going to happen. This is what I do, unfortunately. That's the best I can do, like the best I can offer you.
I'm wondering what Miller, the new Secretary of Defense, and his crew that was installed a month ago. I wonder what they've been able to do in terms of shaping up the deeper command structure of the army, because certainly, it wasn't just a matter of a few of the Joint Chiefs being seditious.
Right.
There's probably kind of a deep web of generals and colonels in there
Mm,
who are not reliable people.
they're
But
not.
we haven't heard a whisper about what's going on below the level of those three guys: Kash Patel, Chris Miller, and Ezra Cohen.
Mm. Yeah, I know that Obama did a wonderful job of purging the upper echelons of our military of people who are actually, um, you know, American patriots. So, frankly, putting people like Jim Mattis in positions of power. And I'm sorry, like I'm done with all of that stuff. So I don't have high hopes for that. What I hope is that the full bird colonels are the ones that are still. You know what I mean? It's not really that even the generals. It's going to be if this is going to play out the way I think it does.
Hmm.
I think it plays out at the full bird colonel level because
Hmm.
those are the guys that are actually going to issue the orders as to whether or not they're going to, you know, whether or not the Marine colonels are going to walk out of the White House and arrest half of Congress.
Hmm.
Right? That's where we are. Because once we get to the point where those people can no longer faithfully and honestly, those highly conscientious, deeply patriotic men, when they're faced with the enormity of the fraud, which is what Giuliani and Linwood and Sidney Powell are presenting to the world right now, when they're and President-elect Biden or new President Biden says we're going to do X, Y, and Z and we're going to take everybody's guns or whatever, or more appropriately, President Trump says no, sorry, he's not going to be president because he's a traitor to the country, and so are these people who are involved in it, and we have the evidence for that, and we're
Hmm.
like producing it behind the scenes either through military courts or whatever. That they just they go along with that, and at that point the whole coup falls apart because again militaries and coups. Intelligence agencies start them, but militaries end them. And
Hmm.
so I don't know. I think it happens at the full bird colonel level, not necessarily at the general level. I think the generals are too political. But I think the guys below that, no, I don't think those guys are not those guys aren't as political. So
Well,
that's
on
where
the
the real.
Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood end of the thing,
Mhm.
it seems to me that they have something like, between 2 and 4 days to play their hand
Mhm.
and get their cards on the table and make sure that the alignment of the cards, is a winning hand and makes sense.
Right.
And they seem to be pretty confident. I found that show that they did in Georgia yesterday to be a kind of a weird, kind of janky event.
Mhm.
But what seemed janky to me might have just been simply the extreme populist element of it. And
I,
by that, I'm not trying to look down on
sure.
regular people. There was just something a little bit kind of homemade about the whole thing.
Mm.
It seemed to lack authority.
Well, I think
Um,
I don't know. I watched a lot of it, and to me, it just looked like this is what they should be scared of.
uh-huh.
The coup plotters. They should be scared of this many people, looking to people like Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell as, their knights that are their generals that are going to lead them, to a fair result in this election.
What do you
And
make of the Georgia governor and
oh,
the Secretary of State?
they're traitors. They're
Do you
GOP
think they have the
establishment.
goods on them?
Oh,
Because there's chatter
absolutely.
that the Chinese laid quite a bit of money on
Yeah, no, I
on
think I
on them.
think they've got them dead to rights. I think that the question is whether or not they can. Again, the whole thing just kind of feels like a someone's trying to limp across the finish line. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And or there's they keep propping up the dam is breaking, and they like the little Dutch boy, and they keep calling in more people to put fingers in holes,
Are
and
you talking of the
that's.
coup
Yeah, the
people?
coup itself. I think that's where we are in this. They're just trying to get it over the finish line at this point. And they're also very arrogant, these people.
Yeah.
Arrogance, power makes you arrogant and power makes you stupid. It makes you lazy. And they got lazy with this. I mean, really lazy. Like they just thought that they were going to be able to print up 3 or 4 million ballots or manufacture this many votes, and people were going to take that lying down.
Uh-huh.
And they've manufactured consent, and they've manufactured a false reality about our elections for years. Sidney Powell's best point is that this thing has been going on for 20 years. We can't be certain that anybody has ever been elected at any important election in 20 years. So do we really believe? Like I talked to hardcore political like demographers and whatnot on Twitter and whatnot, and they're all like still like looking at voter data as a way to say, well, no, really, Georgia is trending towards purple, or it's trending towards blue, and it will probably eventually be turned blue. I'm like, yeah, you're assuming that any of the election data we've gotten out of Georgia in the last 10 years is real. Because how do you know that? Like those vote totals could all be manufactured. That Georgia's actually 55-45 red, but every once in a while they don't change the election result, but they create the idea and they lay the groundwork in an intelligence operation for years to just make the elections look closer than they are for
Well, one
fundraising
really
purposes, for whatever purpose. And the Republicans and Democrats both do this. So
one really has to wonder how this stealth operation of getting these voting machines sold to the states,
yep.
and with the capability of being plugged into the internet and being gamed and being partially conceived and owned by people outside the USA, how that ever happened.
Right.
It's stunning that it just kind of stole in on little cat's feet and became the way we do elections. And now, we've completely
And the
destroyed
governor
people's
the
faith
governor
in
makes
elections.
backroom deals about about ballot signature,
Yeah,
verification and everything with with the gap tooth moron that runs the Georgia Democratic National Committee.
yeah,
Like really, like you're making deals with Stacey Abrams.
yeah,
What are you doing that for? This is the woman who, still refuses to admit that she lost the freaking gubernatorial election, and you're making deals with her.
yeah.
Like, well, come on. Like, it's
Well,
a big club, and
one
we're not in
thing.
it.
This is consistent with a kind of a major theme in the overview of what's going on. This long emergency view that I have,
Mhm.
which is based on Joseph Tainter's notion that civilization's founder, when they make over investments in complexity,
Right.
And, what could be a more egregious overinvestment in complexity than going from paper ballots to janky computerized machines that sophisticated programmers can play with?
No, I know, and I agree. And simplicity is a thing that we're going to have to realize. I mean, at every level of our institutions, and our institutions are Byzantine in a way that that makes the Byzantines look like minimalist, right?
Right.
So my but what I'm thinking here is it's very obvious that where we need to go next is simple blockchain based voting. I can go into that all day long. That technology is actually really quite simple in terms of technology and auditable, and it would take like massive numbers of humans out of the system. I mean, even the complexity itself of running thousands of local elections with hundreds of with all these people, you multiply the potential for fraud, both and corruption, both petty and organized. So many different ways that the whole idea of introducing technology into the system is fine, but doing it in such a way that the oligarchs who want to retain power are the ones buying the systems. No. Open source, simple. It's either Ethereum or Bitcoin-based blockchain voting can be done easily. We can all vote from home. It would be simple. You want frictionless voting, we can give you frictionless voting.
I wouldn't even go that far.
We can give you one person, one vote that we can audit trail.
I would just take computer technology out of it.
I mean, I'm okay with that as well, but I just the people. I mean, here in Florida, we've got paper ballot systems with Scantron machines that, for the most part, have eliminated most of the fraud. If you look at what Florida did, right, we counted more votes than all these other states combined in an hour and a half.
Yeah,
the whole thing was done by 8:30. Once the panhandle reported by 8:35, 95% of the votes were in. They were tabulated. They were sent up to Tallahassee, and they were reported to the election to the media. Right? Easy. Texas did close to the same thing. And 20 years ago, Florida couldn't run a local election if they wanted to. Right? So we showed everybody how to do this, which is part of the reason why I think Floridians are going to be the most angry at this election result. I know I am. Like, dude, we got our shit right. Why the hell can't you? Oh, because you don't want to get it right. You don't want a clean tally of the votes. You want to steal the election. Well, fuck you. Flex it, baby. I'm all over it. I don't want to be governed by you people anymore. This is the thing that needs to be, that people have missed. I've made this point before. I'm like, why would Floridians or Texans who got their votes in an hour and a half, why do they even think that they should have to listen to anything people in Michigan have to say? Why does Michigan get to throw their electoral votes on the table? They can't run an election. They should be invalidated on general principle. Same thing in Georgia, same thing in Pennsylvania, same thing in Nevada. Look, if you want to talk about voter disenfranchisement, great. Go to your elected officials in those states, because they're the ones who ran the crappy friggin' election. It's not my fault. We ran a good election. Like, our vote should count more. Your vote shouldn't count. That's the way absolutely, that's the way I see it here in Florida.
Well, I look forward to visiting the Republic of Florida.
The Sunshine Republic of Florida with our gator money.
I just wanted to make sure that we got to something that we were chit-chatting about before we started recording, and that was the Great Reset, which there's so much internet chatter about. And I like the way you laid out your kind of basic view of the whole thing.
Oh, I think to make it simple, it's just a bunch of German eugenicists. I mean, if you really look at Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and what they're just commies. There's nothing new under the sun here. They're just commies. They just want to run, and they're purposefully, to call back to something you talked about earlier about the destruction of the middle class here in the United States, and the ongoing economic destruction, right? That's going to go on past Inauguration Day. Understand that that's the plan. Like, you can't have a communist takeover without destroying the middle class, destroying the bourgeois, setting the bourgeois and the proletariat against each other while the oligarchs get to roll all the capital up to themselves. And what they're going to do is they're going to issue central bank digital currencies to buy up everybody's business that's been destroyed after they locked us all down and locked us in our homes and told us we can't have Christmas or buy a turkey that can feed 6 people. And then it's not funny. It's actually quite horrifying. And all the good assets will be bought up and held by, the Paul Singers and the George Soroses and the rest of these people and all these vulture capitalists and the Larry Finks over BlackRock and the rest of them. And then, and we'll all get to eat dirt.
I must say that I kind of dissent from the Great Reset bucket of ideas generally. And for a couple of reasons. My macro reason is that I think the zeitgeist is telling us very clearly that we're moving in the direction of decentralization and relocalization. And
Agreed.
That's really going to be the trend going forward, because anything that's organized at the giant level is going to fail in the economy to come. And the economy to come is one of contraction and degrowth and troubled energy supplies, one way or another.
I agree.
And so I see this as being a kind of a wishful thinking bucket of ideas rather than having a whole lot of reality. There are a couple of details that I find contradictory or self-contradictory. The idea that the Germans are entering a kind of new eugenics regime is kind of goes against the idea that they've let in 1 million North Africans and Middle Easterners over the last 10 years.
No. I don't see it. I think.
Tell me how.
I mean, this whole Fourth Industrial Revolution thing is about. Look, they're all partnered with people like Bill Gates and Stanley Johnson and all these Malthusians who believe that the planet really can only sustain 1 billion people. How better to set the German people aflame, but to let a bunch of immigrants in who can steal their jobs and destroy their middle class, their comfortable middle class society and everything else. You have to destabilize the society from within. You certainly have to destabilize.
Yeah, but don't you think that Angela Merkel is fucking around with a really dangerous tipping point?
Of course she is.
The German people are going to turn around and say, "Fuck you, Angela Merkel."
Well, they already are,
and they're overrun by third worlders.
Right. Well, they already are, and now they're turning water cannons on people during anti-COVID lockdown protests. Doing wonders for their immune system, while they also pass new updates of literal Nazi laws that allow the German police to enter your home to see if you're violating COVID lockdown rules.
Well, that story ain't over. I personally don't think there's going to be any kind of a great reset as many people understand it. I think there will be a great reset, but it'll be a reset into disorder. With localized disorder all over the globe.
Right.
I don't think that the Europeans have any more economic mojo than we have in the United States. In fact, they have less. Their bonding situation is a fiasco. Their banking situation, along with that, is a debacle waiting to happen. And I don't think there's any remedy for that. They think that there is, and don't get me wrong. When I present this stuff this way, I'm presenting it from their point of view. I'm not telling you whether I think it's going to work or not. Well, do tell me. Tell me,
because I don't think it's going to work. I think they're going to attempt to do all of which they say they're going to do. Right. Their only way out is of the euro debacle. What they have and all the banking stuff and all the sovereign debt problem is to cancel all the sovereign debt, which the ECB owns 70% of. Right. To cancel all that, reissue it as perpetual bonds, basically stiffing all the bondholders. But now that the ECB owns 70% of the bonds, or is on the hook for 70% of the bonds, who are they really defrauding at that point? And everybody keeps flipping all of their.
They're defrauding the euro.
Right. And then they're going to issue a digital euro. They're going to cancel cash. They're going to do this, and they're going to do it in the United States as well. By the way, this is how they're going to get away. I know it's not going to happen, but they're going to try it. And you've got to realize that these people are not going. From my perspective, they don't give up. Okay, if you want the reason why you want prima facie evidence as to why they never give up, go look at Brexit talks. They're still trying to win wholeheartedly in Brexit, and they've been destroying through the back channels. They've destroyed Boris Johnson's government in order while destroying, while going through a losing fight on Brexit negotiations. They haven't won a point yet. And after 4 years, all they've done is turned Britain, and all they've said is, we're just going to destroy your economy. We're going to destroy your political system from within, which is what they've done. Okay. They've threatened Johnson. They've tried to kill him. They've done all this stuff. He's squandered one of the greatest political victories anyone's seen in the last 50 years. And he's thrown it all away in less than 12 months.
Yeah, how do you think that happened? The theory that I hear is that his wife is ultra woke and just been shoving him in that direction. But I don't really. It doesn't seem.
No, they tried to kill him 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he started with, we're going to do a herd immunity strategy. The minute he did that, all the freaking commies all over Europe. But there's nothing worse than European commies. The only thing worse than European commies are British commies, because that's where all the really fearful communism comes from. It's from the BBC and MI6 and GCHQ. Those are the real commies in the world. Mm-hmm. Like when we start talking about the CIA and everything else, we're really talking about British commies. Like, let's not kid ourselves, because that's who they are, right? And I'm at that point where I don't even mince words anymore and try. I'm like, no, I'm a polemicist when it comes to this. I'm anti-communist. You ask me what I am. I'm no longer an anarcho-libertarian. I'm an anti-communist, because they're everywhere, right? And this is the great communist takeover this is the next communist takeover. This is the EU-SSR. It looks like the Politburo over there in Brussels, the way they act. It's the same thing.
Well, it all seems to be based on the idea that there's actually a public appetite for it, which I don't believe at all.
No one believes.
And I also believe that the economic zeitgeist out there is not going to permit it to happen, whether they want it to or not.
I know. Well, that's why they're trying to destroy the United States. See, the goal here is to destroy the United States and then roll all the capital up and roll all the political power back up to Europe. That's why they have to have a restoration of the Obama, Clinton, Davos crowd oligarchy here in the United States. While at the same time, if you look at Biden's economic plan, which was handed to him, it's literally a blueprint for capital destruction in every way, manner, shape, and form of the American middle class. And this fight that's happening now over the election is exactly the kind of political division that creates the very economic uncertainty, which sets the stage for a collapse of because it doesn't matter who wins this election. The American system loses, and that by definition then can prop up the failing Europe. You understand the thing here?
Well, I do take a number of your points, and the salient one for me is that it's going to be very hard to find any winners in the outcome of this. Now, Scott Adams put out the idea a few weeks ago, which I think is a pretty sound idea, that the best outcome might be for Mr. Trump to prove that the election was a fraud and a steal, and nonetheless allow Joe Biden to take office as an illegitimate president, and then allow him to be buried by the economic consequences soon to follow. Because let's face it, Joe Biden is a cigar store Indian on wheels. They just, roll him out and roll him back into his packing case.
Of course, it's Obama who's actually running the scene, and
I think it is. I think it is, and I think that John Brennan's in the mix too.
Of course he is, and that's why. Well, Brennan. See, but Brennan, I read Brennan a little differently than you. I know you read Brennan as if he's got all this confidence in the world. I think every time I see Brennan talk on MSNBC, I think he's scared.
Well, it's a combo. I see both.
Right.
I see the fear, but I also see that, he thinks that he's got things sewn up.
Well, he doesn't, because there's 75 million people who are going to be looking for him. And he's just not going to be able to. It's like de Blasio in New York. That guy's going to get a wrench to the upside of his head one day. Like, this is what's going to happen next. I'm dead serious. Like, some transit worker, he's going to be like strolling through, the MTA, and some transit worker is going to walk up and just going to whack him upside the head with a wrench. It almost happened 2 weeks ago where the guy was like, "No, de Blasio, you fucking piece of shit." Blah, blah, blah. You see that video? Like, now the next time that happens, that guy's going to be holding a wrench in his hand. And he's
or 30 inches of rebar would be my choice.
Yeah, well, I mean, like on 11, but it's more probable that he'll have an 11/16 open-end wrench on his hand. Gotta be, and as a writer, I always have to make sure it's an 11/16 inch wrench and not a and not just a generic range, because that's the because specificity.
Sure, you got to be specific.
Absolutely,
Details count.
specificity
Hey,
is the.
I'm wondering though what you think of the strange fact
Mm.
that all the violence so far has been actually emanating from the left, and none of it really from the right.
Well, that makes sense,
And
because the lefties are freaking violent. They have to believe that they're right, to the point where they're willing to impose it on everyone else. That's their ideology. And if you don't listen to them, then eventually they get angry with you, and they just say, okay, well, we're gonna figure out a way to cheat and or take over. Okay, you don't want to do what I want you to do today. They're tyrants. Well,
yeah,
I'm going to set up the rules to make you do it, and I'm going to point guns at you in some way to make you do it. Whereas, for lack of a better, and this is very general, but generally people who are more right wing, or more technically, they're really more libertarian, just say, look, I don't want to live that way, and you can live the way you want, but leave me alone. Now, when you push those people too far, and I'm nearly at that point, and I'm sure many of us are,
and millions like you.
we're eventually going to pick up our guns, and we're going to say enough is enough. Viktor Orban and Mateusz Morawiecki in Poland did that the other day to the EU, when they stood up and they said, okay, you guys said that you're not going to tie the budget to rule of law violations, and that was how you got us to sign off on the draft legislation for the budget and the COVID-19 package, the fiscal integration package, Merkel's Hamiltonian moment back in July. And then they give him the final draft resolution, and it's like they're explicitly, and worse than any version that they had ever put in front of Orban in the first place. And he's like, no. If I sign that, Hungary ceases to exist as a country, and Poland said the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, when you back people into a corner where they have no other option, and I wrote an article the other day and I said this, it's like there comes a point where negotiation is itself an act of surrender. You can no longer negotiate with people who are only want your destruction. You have to stand up.
The Russians had a great word for that, which I don't know the word in Russian, but it means unworthy of negotiation.
Yes. Yeah, it's or not, and that you're not agreement capable is the way the Saker described it. There was a moment about four years ago where Sergei Lavrov and Vladimir Putin both used the same phrase, and I don't know the Russian phrase either, but the Saker wrote a great article about that phrase, and he said, and the colloquial two versions of that phrase, and the version that they used. In Russian, there's two phrases that in English translate to not agreement capable, but this particular one has the connotation that you don't want to be agreement. You don't want to be bound by an agreement. You refuse to be bound by an agreement, which is fundamentally different. You are incapable of honoring your agreements because you do not want to. And that's how they describe the United States and Europe 4 or 5 years. And they just said, look, you guys are not agreement capable. I'm not signing any deals with you over anything because you don't.
That's why I got divorced the first time.
Yeah. Thankfully, I'm about to. In February, I will celebrate my 29th anniversary with my wife, who I adore with every ounce of my being. She's the greatest person in the world.
You're a just lucky celebrated. Feller.
Yeah, I know. I worked hard at it, but I sing my wife's praises every time I get a chance. So yeah, she's quite amazing, and actually is very much a part of what makes me a good analyst, because she does she's part of my research team. And she's an amazing mind. So, without
I've got a very agreeable girlfriend who, unlike many of my friends who live in divided households, does tend to see things very similarly, and is a very good researcher too.
Yeah. Camille and I are both hardcore anarcho-libertarians. It's great. We don't disagree about much. She's a little bit more, conservative than I am. But at the end of the day, I'm much more the intellectual in that respect. She's much more pragmatic. But that's fine. She keeps me in line. I don't so I don't go fully off the deep end all the time. But she's finally beginning, after years of listening to me rant about this stuff, she's like, oh my God, you were so right about all this stuff. I'm like, she still think I was a little crazy. And then she started really researching it for herself, because where she researches in sociology and psychology and diet and all this other stuff. And then she starts to really looking at the politics. She's like, okay, all right, Tom, you're right about all this stuff.
It's been very hard to stay sane,
It is.
amidst all of this disinformation and this fog of wokester nonsense that we've been living in.
The wokenistas.
The wokenistas.
Yeah, it is. It's incredible how quickly. I have another friend of mine that I chat politics with all the time. He's like, I remember. He's like, dude, like it was like this is we're talking like in 2016. He's like a year and a half ago we were talking about how trainees are people too, and now all of a sudden we're talking about trainee bathrings. I'm like,
yeah, or the trainee reading hour.
Right, trainee reading hour and all this stuff.
That's become normal.
Right. Are you kidding me? Like, most of these people are like, I have nothing against people who want to live their life the way they want to live it. But, I also don't have to indulge it at the legal level or, to the point where we have to have, egalitarianism is poison is what this comes down to. People are not equal in their capabilities. They're just not. There are differences in people's capabilities and God bless them for it. Frankly, yeah. It's our differences that make us brilliant and allow us to find our bliss within the division of labor and society. Without us, why would everybody want to be the same?
Well, I think wokesterism per se is, or wokesterism qua wokesterism, if we can pretend to be intellectuals, is broadly misunderstood because it's really about nothing more than coercion. Absolutely. It's about pushing people around, and that's really it. And not only pushing people around, but the sadistic pleasure of pushing them around and punishing them for resisting.
I agree. No,
it's not about any of this fucking ideology or sex and gender, race hustle bullshit.
No, absolutely not. It's absolutely about control. It's always been about control. It's always been about because look. The other day I was thinking about this. I was arguing with somebody, and I said, "Look, Marx didn't create a new philosophy with the labor theory of value and Das Kapital and the Communist Manifesto with communism. All he did was describe what happens when tyranny gets crazy, and the tyrannical impulse within people gets crazy. All he did was describe what we do." This is such a new and insouciant and edgy idea. Communism, like tyranny, is a really edgy idea. Like, no, it's not. It's the default position of humanity for thousands of years. Liberty and decentralization are the new ideas. And the circle back as probably the last point because we're getting close to the hour point. To circle back to what you said earlier about the Great Reset and about all of this coup plotting and all this stuff is that, yes, I agree completely that the forces of decentralization are winning out over time, and they always will. But society contracts and expands, that way in waves. And, we're going through a phase. We're going to go through a short-term phase where things are going to contract while the forces of decentralization are pulling everything apart. And the harder that's pulling those things apart, the people who want control and who currently have control are going to fight that much harder to maintain it. And that's what scares me the most about what comes next after January 20th.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good analysis of where we're at.
Right. I think that the thing I'm most worried about is that they've already shown us what they're willing to do. If you don't submit to X, Y, or Z, we'll burn your house down. If you reelect Donald Trump, we're going to burn the country down. If you don't accept the Great Reset, we're going to start World War III, and we're going to burn the electrical grid down, or this or that. If you try and move all your money out in Bitcoin, we'll burn down the electrical grid. That's who these people are. And never forget that there's no depth to their depravity because they have to win, because they have no soul. They have they don't believe in anything. They're just nihilists. And that's what communism is. It's just nihilism. And
well, I'm not a fan.
No, I'm not either. So never have been. James, this has been a blast. Do you have anything else you want to say before we cut this off?
Well, I just want to remind the listeners to gird their loins and prepare for a pretty strange holiday season and New Year, and be brave and resolute and keep your shit together.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend Christmas outside of the country.
Oh, really? Huh?
I'm going to go to Mexico for a couple of weeks and
Huh?
get away from this as much as possible and see where we are at that point. That's what I'm doing. But at the same time, I've been telling everybody, look, we're not down here in Florida, great Republic of Florida. We don't have to wear a mask because our great governor said no. Mask people who want mask mandates are the modern day flat earthers. Ron DeSantis for the win, dude. And I've never been proud of voting for a guy in my entire life. I
Hmm.
am now, right? And so I just tell people that look, I live just north of the People's Republic of Alachua County in Gainesville. They have a countywide mask ordinance in place.
Huh.
Everybody wears a mask everywhere you go. They're all Karens. And I walk into every restaurant, every store, whatever, no mask on, smile on my face, shoulders back, chest out, full alpha male. I go in full alpha male mode and I go, hey, two for dinner, please. Have a night. You look nice tonight. And just play that game and refuse to bow, refuse to consent.
Well, I'm going to give
Because,
myself a Christmas present. A
okay.
Nixon mask.
There you go. I have an obey mask, like from the font from They Live, right? So so I have the obey mask on my and if I have to wear that on the airplane to get to Mexico, that's the mask I'll be wearing.
All
So
right.
I have them on my Cafe Press store. For those of you who would like to buy one. So all right. Well, James, this has been an absolute blast. I'm really glad we finally met you, and hopefully we can do this again one day, and
You
possibly,
bet.
preferably under better circumstances.
Yeah. And would you come on my podcast sometime?
I'd love to. Just send me an email and let me know. And we'll just,
Fantastic.
okay. And I need usually 48 hours notice.
Okay.
All right.
That'd be that I'd do that.
Excellent. So that'll work for me. So why don't we do that? We'll set that up at some point, and we'll go from there. So all right. Well, everybody, I appreciate James's time and your time, and I hope you all have a great day. And we'll talk soon.
Adios, y'all.
And we're done.
Yay.
I'll add a small ending on the end of that with yada yada yada. And
Yeah.
if you send me an email with links to any work that you want me to link directly, either unreview articles that in particular that you want me to highlight, I'll put them in the show notes, your website, all that kind of stuff. Just send me a quick
Okay.
email with some links, and I'll make sure that they're posted up on my blog when I go put it up there.
Okay, I'll send you kind of a little bio thing with the links and stuff.
That'd be good too. I always write up a short post to go along with a couple of paragraphs, and then up on the blog to go along with it. Not that it ever gets picked up by anybody else, but it's just nice to do. So that's the way I do it. I'm not sure if it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but that's how I do it.
So what's up for the rest of the day with you?
I have my taekwondo class at 7 night, and between now and then, I think I'll probably look at my Twitter feed a little bit, and then I'll play World of Warcraft for a few hours. I'm dead
Oh my
serious. I'm gonna
gosh.
I will just tune out at this point. I'll go
I wish I could
downstairs,
do
smoke a
that
cigar.
I wish I could find a couple of hours a day to do that, but I find that I'm just all wound up with this shit. I do
Well,
play the guitar for an hour or
I
so a
do.
night.
I also play music. Yeah, so I play both
You do,
bass.
ya?
Yeah, both the bass and guitar, and I'm also an ex-drummer as well. I should have been a musician.
Well,
Um,
I played before the COVID thing. I was playing in 3 bands:
oh, that's nice.
a contra dance band, playing fiddle and guitar,
Mm.
a rock and roll band, and a Celtic bar band.
Ah, awesome. All three fantastic forms of music that I'm terrible at.
It was so great, man. I miss it so badly. It was
Oh,
like the
yes.
the core of my social life.
Well, it's not just that. It's also that music feeds the right brain and the creative side,
Exactly.
all of that stuff in such a way. I found myself about a month ago or a month and a half ago just saying to my wife, Camille, I don't listen to music anymore.
Oh,
And I don't. So I made a point of getting up in the morning over my morning coffee while I'm playing my stupid browser game or it's my stupid game on my Star Wars game on my phone. I'm like listening to music, and I'm listening to stuff that I've listened to a billion times. And I'm finding myself bursting out in the freaking tears. And I'm like, oh my God, this is
yeah.
killing me. I need to stop. So I took most of Thanksgiving week off. Between the two newsletters I write, my own newsletter and then the one I write for Newsmax, I have a pretty tight publishing schedule. So, and for Thanksgiving, I had to compress that because everything was due a week early. And I got done with that the Monday before Thanksgiving, and I just said, I'm not doing nothing. And I'm just going to be a couch potato.
Yeah.
And I'm at that point where I can't stay in this 12 hours a day anymore. It's killing me. So
Yeah, well, it's harsh. Did you have any other people over for Thanksgiving?
we had I had my wife's family's here. So they were here, and then I had a friend of mine who didn't have any other place to go. So
Yeah.
I have a French friend of mine who's a part of my board gaming group that he doesn't have anywhere to go, so he was over. But normally we would like to have 17, 18 people over for Thanksgiving. We used to do that. We don't do that anymore.
We had like 5 over.
Right. Yeah. So we broke the rules by one person. We had 7. Yeah. Here in Florida there was no restrictions, but I have to make fun of it because it's just so ridiculous. So. All right, sir. Well, I appreciate your time and all of that. Why don't we go from there? Okay.
Okay, Tom. It was great talking to you.
You too. Take care now, James. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that about wraps it up for episode 61 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. I'll be back next week sometime, hopefully on Tuesday, like I'm supposed to be. You can follow me, my work, as always, on my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728, Parler at tomluongo, and you can sign up for the Gold, Goats, and Guns investment newsletter and or the market reports over at Patreon/Gold, Goats, and Guns, where you can also just support doing the podcast and all the other things that I do. So I hope you enjoyed it this week. We'll be back next week. You guys take care. You be well. Be a little ungovernable, too, if you don't mind. Keep your stick on the guys.